Welcome to I Drink Your podcast.
Oh gosh, it's a real pleasure to be here. Thank you.
You leave me no choice. Here comes the smolder.
Wait, you like that?
No,
I don't like that.
No, I don't like that.
No, how about that? You like that?
A little better.
Bread makes you fat?
Does this count as annoying?
Just tell me what you want me to fuck!
Not you, and not you.
Okay, I think it's time to take off your clothes and jump me.
$1 million isn't cool. You know what's cool?
I drink your podcast! I drink it up!
Welcome everybody to I Drink Your podcast. We are in the middle of our 2010 season, going through the best movies that 2010 has to offer, and with me today is my regular co-host, Emily.
Hello, everyone.
And our very special guest from across the pond, Em from Verbal Diorama.
Hello.
Welcome, Em. We're so happy to have you.
Hi, thanks for having me back.
Absolutely.
It's been a while. It's been since another Edgar Wright film.
I know. I was going to mention that because that was not intentional, but I just feel like it's very funny that I've been on twice and they're both Edgar Wright, and I feel like if I come on for a third time, you're going to have to make sure that your next season is another year for an Edgar Wright movie.
For this movie, we have hopefully some themed drinks. Em, do you have anything special in your glass?
No.
Oh my gosh. Come up with something.
I've got some liquid of the gods, aka water.
I love it. Ben, what are you drinking?
I went with the Scott Pilgrim drink of choice, which is 2 gin and tonics.
I thought about that and I went, you know what? I don't feel like getting drunk at 11 in the morning. I'm going to have some sleepy time tea, which I actually had in my house. So.
Oh, I didn't think of that. I've got like fruity green teas downstairs and I didn't even think.
It's okay, It's okay.
Sorry. What a letdown.
Next time.
Well, this week we did watch Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, which is available to stream here in America on Peacock. Em, is it available anywhere where you are to stream?
That is an excellent question because I actually own this on Blu-ray.
Me too.
So it's actually one of my very few Steelbook Blu-rays as well. So yeah, I actually watched it on Blu-ray, but if you bear with me just one moment, I can actually find out whether it is available on streaming. But to be honest, I've obviously this is the second time I've failed on this episode because I failed on the drink and failed on where it's streaming. So over here in the UK, it's actually streaming in several locations. So you can get this on Amazon Prime Video. You can also get this on Sky Cinema on Now TV, and you can also get this on Virgin Media Go.
So many places. And we're so happy to have you back. I'm really just geeking out again. You know, I'm a huge fangirl over here. But so I obviously know what's going on with Verbal Diorama because I follow everything and I read all of the things and I listen to many of your shows. But tell Ben and our audience what's been going on with Verbal Diorama.
So my chief stalker there.
Yeah, basically.
So yeah, I was trying to think what's actually been going on because I think it's been over a year, I think, since the last time I was on, hasn't it? I can't remember exactly when. I don't have the date to hand, but I think it's been a while. And so yeah, I think really the main thing is I've been working a hell of a lot on podcasting, literally putting out episodes all the time. So basically that's literally all I do. I do actually have a full-time job as well, as everyone in podcasting does, by the way, anyone listening. If you think an indie podcaster is literally just indie podcasting, they're not. They also have full-time jobs and lives and families and all of that stuff as well. Yeah, so basically been working a lot on Verbal Diorama. It is my baby. It is the one thing that I really enjoy doing. And it's basically the history and legacy of movies you know, movies you don't. So it's a hell of a lot of research and all of that. I mean, ridiculous amounts of time. I can't even tell you. But so yeah, working a lot on that.
Tell us about some new episodes coming out.
So I can tell you, because at the moment I'm going through this little mini series that I wanted to do called Heroes Through the Decades. And I wanted to focus on heroes. And originally it started out being quite a small thing and it evolved into something bigger. So I've basically gone through from the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. This week, I've just released the 2000s. So basically, just to summarize, the 60s was Jason and the Argonauts, the 70s was Superman, the 80s was Batman, the 90s was Blade, the 2000s was Spider-Man. So next week, as of recording this, it's X-Men First Class. The week after that is going into the 2020s, which obviously 2010s and 2020s full of superhero cinema. Is literally peak superhero
right
cinema.
How do you pick?
I mean, I always wanted to do X-Men First Class. That was, I mean, there's so much, but X-Men First Class just always really stands out as just being one of the best movies in that entire franchise. And it's a movie that's so eclipsed in its franchise, and it's kind of back to basics, you know, very grounded superhero cinema, and I really love that. And then in the 2020s, I decided to do The Suicide Squad because, and obviously as of recording, I haven't even started that episode yet, but I found The Suicide Squad really interesting because obviously X-Men First Class was pretty much, it was a prequel, it was a reboot, and The Suicide Squad was basically a remake and a reboot at the same time.
Right.
And yeah, I found that really interesting. So as this episode is coming out, I kind of, probably The Suicide Squad will have just come out, and then the episode following that is kind of a bit of an offshoot of Heroes Across the Decades, and it's a movie that I've wanted to cover for a very, very long time.
Ooh.
And it's Team America World Police.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Ben
Fuck yeah.
showed that to me.
Because it's an amazing, fun movie, and I love puppets, I love marionettes, and there is nothing out there like Team America. So, so yeah.
Your episodes are so well researched.
Yeah.
How do you go about that research process? Because you pull in stuff that a lot of people probably have never heard before. Like, where do you find all this stuff?
The internet.
I mean, you're just a master Google searcher? Is that it?
I mean, yeah. There's obviously certain words and certain phrases that I tend to repeat, sort of in my Google searching. So I'll Google search for something like, you know, the movie title "Making of" or movie title "Production Stories," or because a lot of the time you do find that there are like written production histories for certain movies online.
Oh, that's super cool.
A lot of the time the studios will write them themselves and publish them sort of on studio websites. I mean, I tend to try and look in as many places as possible. YouTube's also quite a good place because a lot of the DVD extras are on YouTube. So a lot of like commentaries, making ofs, you know, documentaries, all of that sort of stuff, tend to find that on YouTube. And it's basically just a mix of everything. And the idea is that I don't want to tell the same story every time. I try and mix it up as much as possible. And I try to structure it like a story. So I try and start at the beginning and sort of say, well, you know, the story doesn't necessarily start when the movie is starting to be made. The story starts when the comic book came out, for example. And often it's even before that, because there's always a story as to how that comic book, novel, whatever, actually got published in the first place. And a lot of it's based on historical events. You know, you kind of can go back, like X-Men First Class, you could talk about the Cuban Missile Crisis and you know, real life events that influence popular culture.
So cool, Em. Tell us then, why pick this story to guest for?
Well, because I like coming on I Drink Your podcast to talk about Edgar Wright movies.
Perfect.
You know this one girl with hair like this?
Yes, that's Ramona Flowers.
She's out of your league.
You know her? Tell me now.
She just moved here, got a job at Amazon.
I have to order something really cool.
Scott, are you waiting for the package you just ordered?
Maybe.
Scott Pilgrim?
Hi, I was thinking about asking you out, but then I realized how stupid that would be.
That's okay. You just need to sign for this, all right?
So do you want to go out sometime?
If I say yes, will you sign for your damn package?
So yeah, 8 o'clock?
Scott Pilgrim versus the World is at 82% on Rotten Tomatoes. And let's just be real, there was no chance that we weren't going to talk about this movie because we all love it here at I Drink Your Podcast. Even the people that aren't here today, they all love this movie. They all wanted to be on for this episode. It just didn't fit into their schedule. But
right, you know, one had a kidney transplant, the other one has kids, another one has other things going on, you know, just normal life stuff.
Absolutely. This movie was directed by Edgar Wright, who has directed a number of British shows starring British comedians like Matt Lucas, David Williams, Simon Pegg, and Nick Frost. I'm sure Em can educate us on them. Shows like Spaced, Mash and Peas, Stately Homes.
I do remember Em talking about Spaced on our Hot Fuzz episode, so I'm sure she has a lot more to add to that later.
Spaced is one of the formative TV shows of me growing up. And it's such a time capsule of that late 90s, early 2000s here in the UK. Definitely. And geek culture as well, because it's all about geek culture. And so, yeah, it's very me, Spaced.
And then he also directed the movies Shaun of the Dead and one of our top 10 movies of 2007, Hot Fuzz. Starring in this movie is Michael Cera. He was a child actor that first gained notoriety as George Michael on Arrested Development.
So good.
Yes. From there, he went on to star in 2007 movies Juno and Superbad and other movies of the 2000s like Nick and Nora's Infinite Playlist and Year One.
Oh, I forgot about Nick and Nora's Infinite Playlist. That's a movie, isn't it?
And a book.
Oh, didn't know it was a book.
Also starring in this movie is Mary Elizabeth Winstead. She got her start on the soap opera Passions, which was the one where the little boy that was a doll would come to life.
Did
you guys get Passions over in England?
No, I don't know what that is.
I don't even want to know what that is, Ben. That just sounds awful.
After that, she did get her first big movie role in Sky High, the Disney superhero teen high school comedy.
I'm pretty sure you've told me 100 times to watch that. That's still a movie I should watch,
need to
right?
watch it, yes.
Okay.
Maybe we'll do an episode on that. And then went on to star in 2007 movies Death Proof and Live Free or Die Hard.
She was in Death Proof?
Yeah, she was one of the 4 girls in the car.
Oh. I was like, we've seen those. I swear, I've only seen 2007 movies, and I still don't know who people are.
There are also a ton of other famous people in this movie that we can't not going to get into in depth who they are or where they came from, but Jason Schwartzman, Chris Evans, Brie Larson, Kieran Culkin, Anna Kendrick, Allison Pill, Aubrey Plaza, Brandon Routh, Johnny Simmons, and what is, in my opinion, a top 5 fictional band in movie history, Crash and the Boys.
Okay, Ben.
I freaking love Crash and the Boys.
Obviously, we've all seen this movie before, so I didn't have a synopsis prediction on my end, but Em is going to give us the DVD cover synopsis right from the back of the DVD cover.
I sure am. So, what is this synopsis? Anyway.
I know, right?
Straight from the back of the DVD cover.
Is it? I don't know if this is actually on the UK Blu-ray cover because it doesn't sound like this is something that a UK DVD would say. But okay,
probably not.
I'll try and give it as much gusto as possible. Game on.
That's it.
Scott Pilgrim just met the girl of his dreams, literally. But in order for them to date, he must defeat her 7 evil exes, a rogue gallery, including an infamous skateboarder, a vegan rock star, and fearsome identical twins.
You know, that might be the reason or part of the reason why this movie did flop in theaters. I don't know.
It's literally the worst synopsis that I think I've ever read in my life. It literally says nothing about how awesome this movie is.
Mm-hmm.
I know. And I think that's part of the reason, maybe marketing. I don't know a lot about the history of when this movie came out because I didn't see it when it first came out. But I did find out recently that it didn't do well.
Yeah.
And
really
Edgar Wright
didn't.
typically doesn't have movies that do well but become cult classics. And that is just fascinating to me.
This was one that I did actually see at the cinema. I remember going to the cinema to see this and being one of maybe, because I was there with an ex. Well, he's my ex now, but he was my boyfriend then.
Is he evil?
Well, I mean, kind of. No, I'm joking.
Okay.
Yeah, and look, I think it was us two and maybe two other people in the whole cinema, and I think it was either opening night or the day after.
Whoa.
Really, hardly anyone turned up for this movie.
And Ben, did you see it in theaters?
I did not. I rented it on DVD and watched it with my aunt, who was in town from Alaska. So we were just like, let's find a movie that we both would like, and it did not happen. She did not like this movie, but I really did. I really enjoyed it. I loved the video game aspect of it and how it kind of drew in a bunch of different genres that I liked. Like it feels a little bit like a musical, but it's not a musical, and it's a little bit of a kung fu movie, but it's not fully a kung fu movie. So no, I loved it the first time I saw it, and I continue to go back to it very regularly.
Did you see it pretty recently after it came out on DVD?
Yeah, it must have been within a couple months of it being released on DVD.
Right. And then you saw it, opening weekend?
Yeah.
And no one showed up.
Yeah, pretty much. And I have seen it several times kind of over the years because I really, really enjoy this movie. And this movie is very me. Like this, sometimes you feel like you watch a movie and you think, did they make this for me? This feels like one of those. Like, I feel like maybe not made it for me personally, but definitely made it for people like me, these
right.
the video game geeks, the movie nerds, the comic book nerds, all of those kind of things, because it's got so many different aspects of that in here. And I love it so much. And not many people get it at all. And I think you have to be of a certain generation, I think, to really, truly understand this movie and get it.
Or just a really big nerd,
just
like my father.
A massive nerd. Yeah.
It's funny that you bring up comic books because, I know this is based off a comic book and everything, but I didn't watch this for the first time in 2010. I watched this maybe 2015 or 2016. So not too long ago, but, now it's getting a while. My introduction was when I went in Minnesota, we have Half Price Books, which is a secondhand bookstore that people will sell their books to. And I found the book Seconds, which is also by Brian O'Malley, the author of Scott Pilgrim. And the artwork caught my eye right away. It was very fun. And there was this picture of this kind of youthful, cartoony girl, but with some edge to it. And it had this kind of fantastical story about how this chef was fixing her mistakes by writing down her mistake in a journal and then eating a mushroom. And the next day she woke up and the mistake was not there. And I was like, this is so cool. I love this. So I told my, at the time, boyfriend, who's now my husband, about look what I found. This is so cool. And he's like, oh yeah, that's Scott Pilgrim. And I went, what? And so he sat me down and had me watch it. And I was hooked. I think it was probably one of the coolest experiences I've had. And man, I wish I had seen it in the theaters. I think it would have been just so fun with all of the sound effects and visual effects and just comedy. But maybe with only 2 people in the theater, it wouldn't be as great.
It was still a great experience. It was just one of those experiences of, I feel so sorry for people who haven't given this a chance because, and even now, when people say, what's Scott Pilgrim versus the world? And I'm just like, dude, really?
I don't hang out with those people.
it's just such a fun movie, and it actually kind of makes me sad that I think it has got more of a cult following now, certainly, but I just really feel like this deserved to be so big. And what the hell happened?
Well, I think part of it is, how do you sell a movie like this? Because it's so manic and all over the place, and there's no real way to write a synopsis of it that fully captures the magic that happens within it. I think, like we talked about how bad this DVD cover synopsis is, and it's like, you can see that they're trying to capture some of the humor of the movie within that DVD synopsis, where he's like, met the girl of his dreams, literally. Like, they're trying to get it at that humor piece that you're going to see, but it doesn't succeed. And we got to remember that in 2010, at this time, video game movies were box office poison. Nobody wanted to go see video game movies because all of the ones that were made were major flops at the box office.
Was Tron a flop?
Tron came out in like 1982.
No. The new one, Uprising.
Well, Tron Legacy was a flop.
Tron Legacy. So it was a flop.
Yeah, that movie was really expensive to make and did not make the money that it needed.
Okay.
So they couldn't sell this movie as a video game movie because video game movies don't do well at the box office. So then how do you sell Scott Pilgrim to the mass audiences?
I have no idea, because no one cares about Canada either at this point, I guess.
Love Canada. Canada's great. Canada has some really great exports, Keanu Reeves. But I also think as well, it came out at a time, the MCU was in its infancy. You've got DC, who aren't really obviously they've gone through the whole Batman phase. I know you kind of had Batman Begins, The Dark Knight, all of that sort of stuff, but that was very dark, just it was dark, it was gritty, and the MCU was still in its infancy. We had Iron Man, we had Iron Man 2. This was 2010. So yeah, I think that was kind of it for the MCU. It wasn't really a thing. And so comic book movies weren't a thing either. It's not like now where comic book movies are 10 a penny and literally any comic book is mined for, content. We'd kind of had the X-Men movies that had come out. This was actually the year before First Class. So, the X-Men movies had been a thing. Then we had X-Men Origins Wolverine, which kind of didn't do as well. And yeah, I kind of feel like unless it was a huge brand like Spider-Man, like X-Men, something like that, comic book movies weren't really the thing that people went to unless it was a big name hero. And to have this little comic book written by a guy no one really knew about at the time, and to kind of tie that into video game culture as well, which the video game culture that this movie references is, the late 80s, early 90s video game culture. It's from a very specific window of video game culture. So you're not really going to get it unless you are kind of, millennial age. It's not really something that you grew up with. I love the video game references in this movie because I grew up playing Mario and Zelda. And so things like that, I just literally pick at all the little Easter eggs in this movie because they, like I say, it feels like they were made for me. But I feel like they wanted to capitalize on the Edgar Wright name because at the time it was like Shaun of the Dead and then into Hot Fuzz. And Hot Fuzz obviously was a huge movie, way bigger than Shaun of the Dead. And a lot of people started talking about Edgar Wright. And this movie came just before The World's End, which was obviously the closing part of that Cornetto trilogy.
Right.
And yeah, so I feel like it was more on the name Edgar Wright than anything else. But then I don't think they realised that although Edgar Wright is like king of the nerds, the general kind of layperson cinema goer isn't going to go, oh, new Edgar Wright movie. Well, in 2010 at least, new Edgar Wright movie, I'm going to go and see that. Nowadays, people are like, oh, Edgar Wright movie, yeah, I'm going to go and see Last Night in Soho because it's an Edgar Wright movie. But that wasn't the case like 12 years ago,
Right. And 2010 had another comic book movie that didn't have the name recognition that came out and did very well, which is Kick-Ass.
Oh, I love
But
Kick-Ass.
It was able to market itself on this hyper violence that we hadn't really seen in comic book movies before.
Okay.
Whereas Scott Pilgrim is very much kind of a watered down PG-13 movie. Like it pushes the envelope a little bit, but it's also very reserved in what it's giving us. It's not giving us a lot of like, okay, there's a hint of homosexuality. Like they talk about how she's had a former girlfriend, but like, we're not going to get too detailed into that. We're going to hint at a incestuous throuple, but we're not going to actually explain to you how that worked. So this movie had
okay.
right? Like,
yeah, no, I know what you're talking about. And now I'm like, okay, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, it's interesting as well, the kind of dichotomy between this and Kick-Ass, because I really feel like a lot of people, I think more conservative people maybe hate watched Kick-Ass because the media kind of really fixated on Kick-Ass as being, this is the worst movie that's ever been released ever in the whole of history of cinema because of a 11, 12-year-old character who swears, you know, and says the F word and the C word.
Has all sorts of violence, you know.
And yes, like hyper violent. And again, that was Matthew Vaughn. That was the guy who went on to do X-Men First Class. Nice little plug for my podcast there. But, you know, it's Kick-Ass really kind of encapsulated, I think, what a lot of people were saying, oh, this is awful. This is like, look at the state of cinema now when you have children saying the F word on the screen, you know, and all of that. So I think because the media focused on Kick-Ass, that ultimately made Kick-Ass huge.
Versus this movie didn't have any sort of big, what's the word?
Controversy.
Sure, yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. And it's such a shame because I feel like if a character like Hit Girl had been in this movie, it wouldn't have made it any less fun. But I think, you know, maybe it would have been a little bit more visible, I guess, because it feels like this was like this invisible movie that only I saw at the time, you know, for that particular screening, me and like 3 other people. So.
And we mentioned how many famous people are in this movie, but really at this time, these weren't famous people. Like Kick-Ass was able to sell itself as a Nicolas Cage movie. And people went to it to see Nicolas Cage. Like this had Michael Cera, the awkward kid from Arrested Development and Superbad. Like this is not like it's some major tentpole release for a movie star. Like, so I think that's another reason that people didn't flock out to see this one at the theaters.
But now everyone sees it and goes, oh my gosh, literally every person in here is famous or part of like some sort of Marvel movie or something superhero-ish.
Yeah. And it's like for the 10th anniversary, they had like a huge like 10th anniversary thing with like all of these huge names like Aubrey Plaza. And I don't know if Brie Larson showed up, but you know, Brie Larson, Aubrey Plaza, Anna Kendrick, Chris Evans, you know, these are all huge names and they're in this one movie. And it's miraculous, actually, that literally they chose this cast and this cast pretty much all went on to have these huge careers after Scott Pilgrim. It's pretty cool, actually.
Let's jump into the good, bad, and weird of this movie and start with who won this movie for you.
There's just so much good in this movie that I love, but I think I need to start off with just the editing when it comes to sound and visual together, because they are such a partnership in this movie. And I know that everyone who does anything related to podcasting or video essays all talk about Edgar Wright's transitions, but the way that everything has a sound and some sort of really, they're not even subtle visuals. They're very purposeful and they move things along in a way that's creative and exciting and new and something that you wouldn't think of because Edgar Wright has these really spectacular ideas, but everything together with how it lines up so perfectly and moves along and cuts with different framing and has this comic book feel. Every frame is literally a page from a comic book feel. I thought that was probably the best part of setting this movie up.
Yeah, when it comes to editing, the part that stands out to me is there's the part where they're at band practice and then they're transitioning to the Battle of the Bands, and it'll go to Scott Pilgrim and then it'll cut and they're in a different location now, but it's such a seamless cut that it feels like it's all part of one conversation. It's just a masterful way of getting us from one place to another without dragging its feet.
Yeah, I mean, when I was thinking about, okay, what is like the one thing that I think is so fantastic about this movie? And it's like there's so many fantastic things, but I think it culminates to literally 2 words, and those 2 words are Edgar Wright. Because I feel like only Edgar Wright could do a movie like this. Only Edgar Wright could have the imagination to put something like this on screen. Only Edgar Wright could, use those transitions and make them so seamless. And this is not really, it's got special effects in this movie, but a lot of the practical stuff is the stuff that I really love. Like there's the scene just before the credits where they're obviously playing the music, and the title kind of comes up and the camera just kind of goes back, and it's like this really long shot going back. Some of the set transitions are just, it's all practical stuff, and it's just so well done. And I feel like this could only come from the mind of Edgar Wright. And I know we've kind of briefly mentioned his filmography, but I feel like this is one of his lesser known movies, because, you would say, to ask anyone to pick an Edgar Wright movie, they would choose Hot Fuzz, they'd choose Shaun of the Dead, they'd choose Baby Driver. I feel like this is not the one that automatically people would go to, but it should be up there with those, because there's so much brilliant stuff. Emily, you mentioned like the sound and the sound mixing, and it's just really wonderful stuff. But I feel like it's all down to Edgar Wright, this movie. And obviously a very talented cast and crew.
Right. Yeah, my winner was Edgar Wright in combination with Michael Bacall, who were the scriptwriters for this movie. Because condensing a 6-book manga that wasn't finished into like a tight 110-minute movie is just incredibly impressive to be able to do that, because a lot of the times we see a lot of these movies and they feel a little bloated or leave out way too much. But this one feels like it captures most of the stuff really well and gives all of the scenes their own space to breathe. And it doesn't feel like you're being bombarded or like it's slapshod put together. But the sheer amount of hilarious lines in this movie that I quote daily, it's incredible. Like, bread makes you fat is one of my favorite lines that I quote constantly. Every time I pull out a loaf of bread, I say that.
Yeah, there are many times I'll go, no, in the background, like knives.
When young Neil says after the concert, you should see them live. They're much better live. Oh my God. And then I think the line that jumped out at me the most this watch was Crash and the boys. They do their So Sad song, which is like a 2-second song. And Wallace says, "It's not a race, guys." Like the perfect heckle for that moment. Like, I loved it. I loved it so much.
Yeah, and I think, Ben, you're right. There's so many great lines in this movie, and the way that they're delivered and just constantly coming at you. The many times I've seen this, every time I latch onto something different.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this time around, Knives was my favorite character. I always love Knives, but Knives just sitting there on the couch going, "I'll be quiet." She just has such a nice charm. And then she has this really great manic energy to show kind of her spiraling like a teenager would. And I love how she's so energetic and brings this character so much life and positivity. But then at the end of it, she comes to this same self-acceptance that Scott does. And it's like, nah, I'm too cool for you anyway. So I really latched onto her this time.
Other good that you found in this movie?
I mentioned like the gaming references. And I feel like this is like a love letter to so many things. And I think that's why I love this movie so much, because it's a love letter to its own source material. It's, I understand, quite faithful to its source material as well. It's a love letter to, well, what is now considered retro gaming, the old
right
Zelda and Mario. The fact that the band is called Sex Bomb, which is
right.
like, people won't know what a ba-bomb is. Like, you ask a kid nowadays about a ba-bomb and they're just like, what are you talking about? But ba-bombs were like a thing, like the whole growing up with like Mario games. Like, I literally grew up playing Nintendo. So the fact that it references Zelda and the music of Zelda and Mario and also like multiplayer games, like fighting games, arcade games, you know, that's the sort of thing I grew up with too. Like you go down to an arcade and you'd play like double player fighting games or racing games. And so to me, this is why I feel like this movie was kind of made for me in a way, because this was the stuff that I love to do. And also I have to kind of shout out, because I almost put him as my kind of main winning, but I love Kieran Culkin as Wallace Wells.
Oh my gosh,
he's
I know.
amazing. It's like, I love that he's so acerbic, but he's also like the grounding heart of the movie, and like he's like the conscience, really. And then he's also a bit of a slime ball in a way as well, because he's literally stealing his friends' boyfriends, and then like he like ends up with like all of these boyfriends. And yeah, I think Kieran Culkin is exceptional in this movie. And yeah, there's just so much that I love about this movie, and there's so many great performances in this movie as well. Like, literally, I feel like everyone was on the cusp of greatness in this movie. I don't feel like anyone is slouching in this movie in many ways. And I know this probably sounds a bit harsh, but I feel like Michael Cera had a really tough sell on this movie, because I feel like we're going to speak about Scott as a character at some point, but Michael Cera not only had to make this character likable, but he also basically had the whole of this movie on his shoulders. And I do think he did an admirable job. And in a way, it's kind of a bit sad, because I haven't really seen him in anything recently. It feels like he's the one who hasn't really had much of a career kind of post this, and like everyone else has got really huge. But I haven't seen him in anything recently. I don't know if either of you have seen him in anything recently.
That's a good point.
I don't think I have, other than obviously Arrested Development coming back.
All right, I don't know if that counts.
Right.
Speaking of Wallace from earlier, I did want to call out one of my all-time favorite scenes, and that's when Wallace opens the door to find knives and immediately closes it, and Scott jumps out the window. That is probably one of my favorite gags that they have. And there's so many gags in this movie. You know, when the vegan police high five behind Scott. Excellent. Absolutely excellent. And, you know, Em, you were talking about all the video game references and the fighting games, but how they combine that with a lot of the fight choreography. Ben, you talked about how this has a musical feel to it, and it's because of that. You know, they're emphasizing different moves and movement and choreo with a lot of those gaming sound effects. And even though I didn't play a lot of games when I was younger, I watched my friends play them because I wasn't allowed to have anything related to fun in my house. I still recognize a lot of the sounds. I was still feeling kind of nostalgic, but it had such a punch. That's not a pun. I promise.
There's one part that I think calls out Edgar Wright's brilliance in this movie, or at least his foresight of how this movie would be interpreted. The scene where Matthew Patel breaks out into song, and they cut to Anna Kendrick, and she just goes, "What?" It's like Edgar Wright knew that he was going to lose the audience at that time, so he put a surrogate into the movie to be like, "Oh, this is crazy, right?" And then the audience couldn't call him out on it, because it's like, "Oh, we recognize that this is crazy, so you can't really use this against us." Like, I love that part, and it's such a smart move from a screenwriter and director to do that, to kind of be meta and call out the weirdness of the scene within, because it's so in line with everything else we see to be able to do that. Because I know the first time I saw it, when he started singing, my reaction was like, "What? This guy's actually like, what are we doing? What is this movie?"
And I think also just the movie itself escalates on itself as things go on. You know, things start out pretty basic. You're not really sure what you're expecting. And then suddenly that title card sequence happens and you're kind of getting this fantastical elements. And then you get the band playing. They're actually good. And then when Matthew Patel comes in, you're like, okay, what? And the characters have the same reactions as everyone in universe. And I love that because you don't know what you're getting until that moment. Like everything's hinting at it and it's building it up. But until that happens, you're really not sure where this is going.
Yeah, because even like with the email, so Scott gets an email from Matthew Patel, and it's basically like, "Dear Mr. Pilgrim, I'm looking. I can't remember exactly what it is, but it's basically, we are going to fight soon. Kind regards, Matthew Patel." And you get like Scott going, "Oh my god, this is so boring," delete. and then it kind of calls back to it with Matthew Patel's like, "But didn't you get my email?" And he was like,
I skimmed it.
Yeah, I skimmed it. And I just love that because it's like it takes this like quite semi-serious like fight scene, and the fight scenes are so brilliantly choreographed, like we've already said, and really inventive as well, because each fight is different to another fight, kind of capitalizing on the actual character of which ex that he's fighting. And I love the visual references because this is such a visual movie. So for each fight you have the number of that ex in scene,
right,
like on t-shirts in the background. And I just love the level of detail in this movie is really quite phenomenal.
I don't think this is a fair question to ask, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Do you all have a favorite fight scene / X? Because, I mean, I really, really love the third one. Fucking Todd. And I like that one is so funny to me. And the swirling cups around them as they're playing bass at each other. And like I said, the vegan police, everything about it is so good. And I love them all, but I think that one just a smidge over the other ones. That is probably my favorite.
Yeah, I do like the Todd one because I think that is the fact that they're both bass players, and it kind of, capitalizes on the fact that they're both bass players. And it's just a really silly way of Scott being able to take down that particular character because he's vegan,
right.
and because he puts half and half in one coffee and then there's like soy milk in the other. And yeah, so he accidentally drinks the wrong coffee, but then the vegan police have like a list of all of the other non-vegan things that he's consumed.
Chicken parmesan, not vegan.
Yeah, and it's just hilarious because I think it's fair to say that there are some vegans out there who take being vegan, really seriously, and it's like, they will preach their veganism to other people, and then I think there are more vegans out there who just like, well, this is how I want to live, and they don't preach to other people. But I think there are some that maybe do, and I feel like Todd Ingram is probably a very preachy vegan. Like, look at me, I'm vegan.
I'm better than you. I think he literally says that.
For him to be called out by the vegan police is probably it's definitely one of the most famous scenes in this movie, I think. I think my favorite X is not my favorite fight. And my favorite X is Lucas Lee, because I love the whole Chris Evans playing up this superstar persona. And even like the little neck, the neck crack to the dun dun. I'm doing it on video. You can't see. Listeners can't see that. But, yeah, when he does the little neck crack. And then he brings out his stunt doubles.
We're actual Chris Evans stunt doubles.
I know.
I just learned that.
And it's just one of the funniest things. It's like Lucas Lee's like, yeah, I'm going to get a coffee. Do you want one? And, oh, no, mate, it's okay. I've just had one. And lets the stunt team just like, kick Scott Pilgrim's head in. And then, but I don't like the fight because I know it's all about Lucas Lee's ego and everything like that. But the whole like skateboarding down, I don't even know what that terminology is, but like grinding, I think it's called, down the...
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm not a fan of that, even though I understand it's all about his ego. I probably prefer the Matthew Patel fight because it's a bit more like a video game fight. So yeah, I've got two answers basically. Lucas Lee's my favourite X, Matthew Patel's my favourite fight.
Emily, I'm going to answer your question by not really answering your question.
You bitch.
because I have a least favorite fight, and that's one of my bads of this movie.
Okay.
I don't like how underdeveloped the Katayanagi twins are. I feel like they're the one set of exes that are not given the time to really like build and breathe within this movie. We're not given any insight into what their relationship was like with Ramona, whereas everyone else was. We see like little animated glimpses of what their relationships were like, or at least we get the buildup of like the lesbian ex. But with the Katayanagi twins, we didn't get any of that. And I think a lot of it had to do with the actors not being able to speak English. So with that, I mean, I can understand why we weren't given more, but an additional 3 minutes on this movie to really flesh out the twins' relationship with Ramona and maybe build on that fight a little more. I would have appreciated that in this movie.
Yeah, and I guess they had the comic elements throughout each ex kind of showing what was happening in the past, except maybe they didn't do that for Roxy.
No, I don't think they did.
I'm trying to remember. But they did it for quite a few, so maybe that would have been a common theme throughout, except for Gideon, because Gideon was like the big bad one. So I don't know. What do you think, Em?
No, I would be in agreement. I think that the twins, I feel like, were a little bit of a throwaway pair of characters in that they were only really there for the fight. Because I think the questions brought up in the movie, as in like, you know, she dated twins. Like, how does that work? Like,
right?
Did she date one twin and then the other twin afterwards? Did she date both twins at the same time?
So many questions.
Yep. So many questions that we need answers for. But yeah, maybe it was a time thing. Maybe it was just like they, like you said, Ben, about the actors. Maybe they just thought there's no point going into the history. I don't know, but yeah, it did feel like a bit of a lost opportunity to kind of flesh those characters out, or maybe they just thought, yeah, how are we going to explain the fact that she dated twins? I don't know.
Does anyone else have other bad?
I mean, there were a couple moments that were a little dated, you know, using certain language that has some pretty negative connotation, like the R word. And I know like Gideon is a really awful, slimy sleazeball, but calling this Asian actress, I know it's the character, she's Chinese, Kung Pao Chicken, it was really, like, I get it. I get that it's to show Gideon is a shit, but also it really did not feel great in 2022 hearing that.
Yeah. I mean, they really fixated, even Scott Pilgrim fixates on the fact that Knives is Chinese because it's mentioned quite a few times. Like, because I feel like the relationship between Scott and Knives, it's a kind of questionable thing in that I know that the laws about consent and stuff are different between here in the UK and here in the US. So here in the UK, the age of consent is 16, but I believe it's 18 over in the States.
There are some complicated rules here.
Depending on state, I'm not sure.
It's state by state, yeah.
Yeah. So that's why Ben got away dating, you know, a teenager when he was in his 20s.
You.
Well.
He's very similar to Scott Pilgrim.
But yeah, the things that I didn't particularly like were the fact that Scott pretty much constantly brings up the fact that she's Chinese. I don't know if that's like some sort of like Asian fetishization thing. I'm not sure.
Right, yeah.
But also the fact that she's a schoolgirl as well is really icky. You know, and how he treats Knives as well. You know, she is a really young girl. This is probably like her first relationship. And although, you know, he does say, oh, you know, we haven't even held hands, you know, all of that sort of stuff. So it seems like a fairly innocent relationship, but he's still technically dating this schoolgirl. And the other thing I don't like as well is how he treats Ramona. You know, it's almost like he shames her for having so many exes. And, you know, he's 22, so I don't think it actually says how old she is, but let's assume she's 22 as well. The fact that she's got 7 exes is literally none of Scott's concern. I know it kind of is because he has to fight them, but I don't like the fact that the character of Scott shames the character of Ramona as if like this is all her fault because she's had 7 exes.
Right. And I feel like his sister calling him out for that. There's just a moment I was like, thank goodness someone said something, because I felt the same way, Em, you know. She has relationships from middle school that are these exes,
exactly.
You know. They're being dramatic in this where we just used to fuck shit up and smash mailboxes and things.
Right.
I mean, that was the kind of dating she did for some of these. So you're absolutely right. He doesn't treat her in a great way. But maybe that's kind of the point, because by the end of it, he has that self-acceptance of realizing he's been a shit.
Yeah, I certainly do think that it kind of adds to the journey of Scott, because Scott is unlikable. Like, genuinely throughout the movie, he is not a character that you should like at all. And the movie does that on purpose, because I think the movie is trying to show us that anyone can become an evil ex. And I think that's the point, is you have a choice when you're in, you know, whether you're just like holding someone's hand in, you know, 11th grade or whatever. I don't know what the grades are. We have different systems here. But, you know, even if you're just like holding someone's hand throughout, you know, you're having like a proper sexual relationship with a person, it's up to you how you behave with that person. It's up to you how you behave after you and that person split up. And one of the things that I do like is Ramona calls him out and basically says, you're just another evil ex in the making, because he's being such a shit to her. And I think, you know, speaking from the perspective of a woman, you know, it's sometimes relationships work and sometimes they don't. But if you have any inkling that the person that you're with is not the person for you, then it's absolutely right that you should be able to walk away from that relationship and not have that relationship come back and haunt you multiple times. And one of the things that really kind of spoke to me, especially in this viewing, actually, it's not really spoke to me in any previous viewing, is just the idea that people have past relationships. It's just a fact of life. You shouldn't be defined by your past relationships and who you dated before, because who you're dating now, that's kind of inconsequential. The fact that you dated someone before is A, not their business, and B, nothing to do with your relationship with them now. And it's kind of unfortunate for Ramona that she's constantly having to be put through this, because this is not her fault. You know, she's moved on from these people. These people can't move on from her. And, you know, the whole League of Evil Exes thing that Gideon puts together is just a way to kind of trap Ramona into getting back together with him. And it's really, really fucking toxic stuff, because you know that there are guys and girls out there who will continually contact, message, phone, you know, call their exes. You know, get back together with me. I still love you. I'm sorry for what I did. I just want to be with you. And this movie is a really light-hearted way to look at that. But I think there's some really serious undertones of real toxicity with regards to relationship in this movie that it very kind of lightly touches on. But it was really vividly clear to me, specifically on this watch, actually, that a lot of the time women are blamed for the toxicity of their relationships. And, oh, why didn't you just leave him? You know, why didn't you just walk away? This girl, Ramona, is trying to walk away from Gideon Graves, and he is not letting her do that. And he is doing everything in his power to keep her with him. And I mean, it's really shocking stuff, but this is stuff that happens, not just to women, it happens to men as well. But I think this is something that happens to a lot of women out there. Sorry to get
Absolutely,
all serious for a second.
No, I think it's really great that you went that route with this watch. I think that I didn't quite go there with this watch, but you're right. The undertones are set up. They're there. I think I definitely take the more light-handed approach in it, and I guess I'm excited to like go back and watch this again with those more, I guess, dramatic thoughts.
Yeah, sorry. I feel like I've taken the tone down of this episode a little bit. But...
Oh, believe me, Em, we will get lighthearted and silly very shortly.
But I just feel like stuff like that needs to be talked about a little bit more. Because,
absolutely.
You know, there are movies out there that really take a heavy-handed tone with that sort of thing. And this movie is very light, fluffy, and it is fun. It is a fun movie, and I love this movie so much. But when we're talking about power dynamics, I mean, this movie is just full of like power dynamics. You know, you've got Scott Pilgrim, who's 22, dating a 17-year-old. You know, that is a power dynamic to have, like an age difference in your relationships. And this is coming from someone, when I was 17, I was dating a guy who was 26. So
nothing wrong with that.
But, you know, now I look back and I realise that the power dynamics were all wrong, because I was 17, he was 26. He had all the power in that relationship because I was so young, and it was like one of my first relationships and all of that sort of stuff. But yeah, it's just something that I really do feel like this movie is super fun, and please don't think it's not super fun, because it is. But there is a tiny little bit of like some really serious talk that this movie is trying to do, and yeah, I just thought it was worth going into.
Absolutely, and it does it in a way where it's a conversation that can easily come up. You know, it's not that when you have a group of friends watching it that you couldn't talk about some of those concepts and ideas, because you can talk about like your own toxic relationships or mistakes you've made, and it brings it up in such a lighthearted way that it makes it easier to talk about, I think.
Okay, are we ready to jump into the weird?
Sure, although I didn't really think of anything specific.
Oh, I had one major weird.
Okay.
And it is defeating the female ex by making her orgasm from a single touch was so clearly written by a man that it took me completely out of the movie.
Is that what happens?
Yeah, actually, yeah. That is what happens. I didn't think of that. Yeah, because she says about like her erogenous zone is like the back of her knee, and so he touches the back of her knee, and then she's like, oh, and then that's it.
Oh my God, that really hurt my brain a bit.
Oh my God, it was.
I just thought
so
she was like ticklish or something.
No,
I'm serious.
No.
What is wrong with me?
Oh my God, Emily, you're so innocent.
Who the fuck's talks about the back of their knee being an erogenous zone? She said weakness. I assume tickling. Oh my God, what's wrong?
Yeah, I didn't think of that actually. That is pretty weird and so written by a man.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I didn't really have. The only weird thing I kind of had was the whole Scott dating a high schooler when he's like 22. Because to me, even though the age of consent here is 16, so a 22-year-old dating a 17-year-old isn't weird. It still feels pretty weird because she's in a school uniform, and again, it kind of brings up this weird like fetishism thing, you know?
Well, and I think the movie knows that it's weird, and that's why it bends over backwards to try to make their relationship not physical.
Yeah, I think so. I agree.
Because it keeps reminding us that they're not physical. But then another weird that I had is that Knives at the Battle of the Bands runs up and kisses him on the lips. Like, are we to assume that that's their first kiss?
I guess so, yeah.
Right? So that just felt very weird to me, to be like, you're hammering home the point that it's not physical, and then she greets him with a kiss like someone who's in a physical relationship would. So that felt very off to me.
Yeah, I can understand that. I took it on more of her as a high schooler caught up in drama and is really excited and just expressing herself and has tons of hormones. So I was ready to just follow it.
Why don't we put a cork in this thing and give our final thoughts on Scott Pilgrim versus the World? And we'll start with M.
Oh God, I genuinely, I know I feel like I've said some quite deep and meaningful things, but I genuinely love this movie so much for everything that it tries to pay homage to, for all of the references it puts in there, all of the Easter eggs it puts in there. It's so much fun. I could literally watch this movie on repeat, and I would never get bored of watching this movie. And I think that was one of the reasons why I was so excited to come on and talk about it, because it's just one of those really joyous, underrated movies that, in a way, I'm kind of happy to kind of for it not to be overrated, because I feel like I can kind of keep it to myself a little bit in a weird way, and then introduce random people to it in the hopes that they'll enjoy it. But I really do think this movie deserves so much more of an audience. Yeah, people just need to give it a chance. And obviously we've kind of touched on the music, but the music is really good as well. It's got some really great music. I actually, a little bit of trivia. So the Clash at Demon Head song was my ringtone for a little bit, because I just loved it so much. And yeah, it's a really, really fun movie, and yeah, I just think it's really cool.
I had a student audition for a musical singing that Clash at Demon Head song, and I knew I was ready to give her whatever role she wanted after that, because I was like, I love that you know that song and that you chose to sing that for your audition.
Was that Emily?
That was Ren.
Oh, okay. I felt like it could have been Ren or Emily. That's awesome. That's amazing.
Emily, how about you? What's your final thoughts?
Scott Pilgrim vs. the World is probably one of my favorite movies to just sit down and have a great time with. I think that you come for the silliness and the music. You stay because it's so well put together and excellently done and has a great cast. And if you don't like it, you can come fight me. I will be ready.
Emily is literally everyone's evil ex right now.
Right, exactly. Or is everyone my evil ex?
Oh, well, yeah. Probably that way around. Yeah, that sounds a lot better.
Ben.
Everything in this movie clicks for me and falls into place. I love this movie. You need to see it live. It's much better live.
You're so stupid.
What's your favorite idea? Mine is being creative.
How do you get that idea?
I just try to think creatively.
Number 1, what random item are you ordering from Amazon to get your crush to deliver it?
Do you know what the first thing that came to my mind is? Oh my God, I've been ordering a few of them recently. Like a fake potted plant. It's just the first thing that came to my head. I don't even know why. Because I should have been like, perfect. Scott Pilgrim DVD, duh. But no, I will explain, because I cannot keep plants alive in my house. So I order fake plants, and I've been ordering fake plants recently. Oh,
I have some friends that buy fake plants from IKEA and get super excited about them. So you are not alone in that.
That's like, oh, okay. Embarrassing myself with my off-the-cuff responses, but never mind.
I love it. I love it. Ben.
Oh, man. I don't have as good of an answer as Em just had. I would probably just order what's in my cart now waiting for me to order it, which is actually a Donald Hertzfeldt DVD of animated shorts called The World of Tomorrow. So that's what I would have delivered to me. I don't have anything fun. I know.
I mean, it's no fake potted plant, is it? Let's be honest.
No, it's not.
No, it's not.
All right, number 2. Scott has a weapon come out of his chest. Not one, but 2 weapons, right? His are swords, and they're for different reasons. I gotta know, what kind of weapon would come out of your chest?
I'm not really very well versed on weapons.
Mine would be just a single ninja star, which I wouldn't know how to throw correctly and would completely waste if I was trying to actually use it in a fight. So it would be completely useless for me. So whoever's fighting me is going to live.
Well, okay, I'll take your ninja star and raise you some nunchucks.
Yes.
But then what I'd end up doing is I'd end up hitting myself in the face with the nunchucks, because I've never actually used nunchucks before. So, so yeah, it would be like, I'd try and like, and then just, so.
So bear with me. I was originally picturing some sort of siege weapon, because I think it would be so silly to try to animate something like that. But then I went, you know what? It's going to be Grog from Lord of the Rings. That's the siege weapon that's coming out of my chest. That was the inspiration for my question. Okay, last one, number 3. If Scott actually had to fight an additional ex of Ramona's, who would they be? Besides Nega Scott, obviously. One of your exes?
God, I don't know. I feel like I wouldn't want to put Scott through that. I'm just trying to think who else was like up and coming in like 2011 who could have like fulfilled the role. I tell you what, I'm gonna keep it in the MCU and I'm gonna say he's gonna take on an ex played by Chris Hemsworth, because Chris Hemsworth was obviously quite up and coming at the same time. But I feel like it's going to be like pre-Thor Chris Hemsworth. So I feel like it's going to be like some sort of like hunky buff off in a way. So like he sheds all his clothes and he's got like these rippling muscles and like these huge arms. And Scott Pilgrim's a bit like, you know, swooning a little bit because this hunky marvel of a man, no pun intended, is like standing before him. And then like Scott takes his clothes off and he's like this little tiny little weedy thing. I think that would be quite funny. And then maybe he could defeat him by, I don't know, taking away his steroids. I don't know. I'm not suggesting that Chris Hemsworth uses steroids, but you know.
This is a perfect last question because it segues into my game. So I'm gonna turn the page on you.
Shall we play a game?
I despise guessing games.
This great game. Makes you think and it helps your memory.
Let the games begin.
My game's called Fight! Love that Kieran Culkin line. But Scott Pilgrim fought and defeated many of Ramona's exes, but he didn't defeat all of them, just the evil ones. Well, in the sequel, and keeping in line with the toxicity of Scott, Scott wants to marry Ramona, but before he can, he has to defeat the rest of her exes, the 6 not-so-evil exes.
Oh my God.
Who all happen to be famous movie characters. So I'm going to give you an upcoming Scott Pilgrim fight, and you need to tell me how he wins, and we're going to go back and forth between Em and Emily. You both get to play. You both will get unique fights, 3 rounds, but everyone's a winner because we all get to hear this great creativity. So, Em, how does Scott Pilgrim defeat E.T.?
Well, surely that's easy because he just phones home and E.T. is so grateful that he can actually go home that he basically fingers fingers. Actually, no, I'm going to go there. He fingers Scott Pilgrim, and Scott Pilgrim's really happy. E.T.'s really happy, and yeah, then E.T. goes home.
I love it. Okay, Emily, how does Scott Pilgrim defeat Smeagol?
He's going to start throwing in rings, like a ring toss, into the river where Smeagol is trying to catch a fish, because, you know, that's a very typical swimming sort of pool game. And Smeagol is going to get so distracted by all these rings everywhere that he's not even going to notice what's happening as he marries Ramona.
Love it. How does Scott Pilgrim defeat Forrest Gump?
Well, my mama always said, life is like a box of chocolates. I'm gonna give Scott Pilgrim some chocolate. And so basically, Forrest Gump gives Scott Pilgrim a box of chocolates in celebration of his forthcoming wedding. And what Scott Pilgrim doesn't know is the chocolates are laced with arsenic, but in like a clever switcheroo.
Not so evil.
It's a clever switcheroo.
Okay, maybe not arsenic, maybe like
laxatives.
Yeah, laxatives. That's what I was thinking. Maybe like laxatives. So like he switches them over a bit like he does with the half and half coffee. And Forrest Gump has to literally run, like, run, Forrest, run, to the toilet And then Scott can marry Ramona.
Lovely. Emily, how does Scott Pilgrim defeat Shrek?
My goodness. Scott Pilgrim creates an invitation to an Airbnb where Shrek can be alone forever, indefinitely, without anyone, especially donkeys. There's like a donkey fence keeping him. And I'm obviously talking about like Shrek in the beginning of the movie.
Yeah.
Of the first one.
And then just locks him there, or?
Nope, he just stays indefinitely because Scott Pilgrim's continuing to pay the Airbnb.
Wow.
That's generous.
Yeah. Okay, how does Scott Pilgrim defeat Luke Skywalker?
He doesn't.
Luke Skywalker has his hand chopped off by Darth Vader. He finds out that Darth Vader is his father. And
spoilers
for a movie that's like 40 years old. Yeah, so he's just found out that like Darth Vader is his father. He's like traumatized. And so Scott Pilgrim starts to fight Luke Skywalker, and Scott Pilgrim's like, oh, you'll never guess what happened. Like, just before I was dating Ramona, I had to fight her 7 evil exes. Like, I bet you can't top that. And Luke Skywalker's like, well, dude, you know, I was fighting this guy, and then I found out that he was actually my dad, and then my dad chopped my hand off, and like my dad is like basically trying to take over the galaxy, so like I think I win. And like Nega Scott at the end of the movie, like him and Luke Skywalker just basically start to like talk about their trauma together, and they just end up becoming really good friends.
Yeah.
He sets Nega Scott on him.
and then Luke Skywalker ends up being his best man at the wedding to Ramona.
Oh, that's really sweet. Okay, last one, Emily. How does Scott Pilgrim defeat Evan from Superbad?
Evan is such a pushover. Scott Pilgrim is just gonna trick him by going, whoa, look over there, boobs, and then walk away.
Wow.
Now let's all agree to never be creative again.
Okay, thank you for playing that game, and I'm glad that I was able to provide 6 answers to your last Twits question, Emily.
Yeah, shut up, Ben. You suck.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us this week, and Em, thank you so much for guesting on this episode with us. We really appreciate you being here.
Thank you for having me back again. Yeah, it's been so much fun. Thank you so much.
Why don't you plug your show before you go and let us know where we can find it?
Sure. Yeah, so Verbal Diorama is the podcast that's all about the history and legacy of movies you know and movies you don't. And yeah, you can find my podcast. It's a very light kind of solo hosted show. It's basically just me talking to myself and by proxy talking to the internet, which is a lot better than it sounds, I promise. So, well, I hope it is. But yeah, you can find my podcast basically anywhere you found this podcast. That's always a good way to find podcasts. So yeah, you can basically find me on your podcast app. You can find me on social media, so Twitter, Instagram, Facebook at Verbal Diorama. Yeah, feel free to talk to me about Scott Pilgrim because this movie's cool and I'll talk about it. Well, I've talked about it for like a good hour and a half, so I could talk about it for a lot longer.
Thank you again for joining us, and thank you, listeners, for listening to us thus far. We do appreciate your patronage. Please like, rate, subscribe, share us with a friend or two. You can follow us on social media at IDYP_podcast on Twitter and Instagram, and you can email us at idrinkyourpodcast@gmail.com. Next week, we'll be joined by Dylan to watch Taika Waititi's movie Boy, which is a movie I had not heard of until I started researching this 2010 season. So I'm sure Emily hasn't seen it.
Nope.
But you know who Taika Waititi is?
Yep.
And it's going to be about a boy.
Are you sure? It just
Not
says
the movie
boy.
about a boy. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll get on that synopsis prediction then.
Yeah, please do.
And before we go, in your best Daniel Day-Lewis impression, would you please end the episode by saying, I drink your podcast, I drink it up.
Oh, okay. Bit of a confessional.
Good luck.
I had to look this scene up on YouTube because I've never seen the movie, and I was like, how does he do it? But it is kind of what I thought. So I'm really terrible at impressions as well. So
that's okay.
let me prep. I drink your podcast. I drink it up.
I love it.
That
was so good.
Really good.
Great job.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.
Thank you.